The US Army Rifle Squad has evolved significantly over the past century. This video covers the official squad organizations as they existed in the Table of Organization and Equipment. From weapon evolutions to doctrine revolutions, this video chronicles every major change to the squad organization and equipment since 1918. Timestamps are now up if you're interested in any particular year of the US Army Rifle Squad. During World War I, the Rifle Squad was a simple, all-rifle 8-man unit. It consisted of 1 squad leader, a corporal, and 7 riflemen. 3 of the riflemen were private first classes, and 4 were privates. By 1918, the M1917 Enfield would have been the most common service rifle in Europe. The M1903 Springfield and Craig Jorgensen were also used in smaller numbers, but were more common back home. There was no real difference between the AEF and stateside rifle squads, although the stateside rifle platoons lacked the more specialized weapons available to the AEF platoons. At this point, rifle grenade launchers, hand grenades, and Shosho automatic rifles were in dedicated sections of the rifle platoon, while the rifle squad specialized in riflemen. You can check out our video on the AEF rifle platoon during the time period for full details. However, this changed during the interwar period. In 1920, each squad consisted of 1 squad leader, a corporal armed with an M1903 rifle, 1 BAR man, a private armed with an M1918 BAR and M1911 service pistol, 1 rifle grenadier, a private armed with an M1903 rifle and VB rifle grenade launcher, and 5 riflemen, privates armed with M1903 rifles. This would remain mostly the same throughout the interwar period, although in 1927 the BAR man's pistol was removed from the organization. In 1938, the rifle platoon saw a major reorganization. Each squad consisted of a sergeant squad leader, a corporal assistant squad leader, and 10 riflemen of the rank private. All men were armed with the new M1 rifle. Rifle squads were increased from 8 to 12 men, and the new M1 Garand rifle was to be introduced to replace the older M1903. If M1 rifles were not available to the unit, the M1903 would be used in lieu, and 1 BAR would be retained. Generally, the BAR was moved to the light machine gun section of the company's headquarters platoon, meaning there was no longer a squad automatic weapon. It seems the thought was that the new semi-automatic firepower of the M1 rifle would compensate for the overall decrease in automatic firepower. This sentiment was incorrect, however, and by 1940 the BARs would be moved to a dedicated BAR squad within the rifle platoon before ultimately being moved back to the rifle squads themselves. After the outbreak of World War II, the Rifle Squad was again reorganized into what it would fight most of the war with, save for a few minor tweaks. As of April 1942, the squad consisted of 1 squad leader, a sergeant armed with an M1 rifle, 1 assistant squad leader, a corporal armed with an M1 rifle, 1 BAR man, a private armed with an M1918A2 BAR, 1 assistant BAR man, a private armed with an M1 rifle, 1 rifle grenadier, a private armed with an M1903 rifle and M1 grenade launcher, and 7 riflemen, privates armed with M1 rifles. Despite the introduction of the M1 rifle, the rifle grenadier was still issued with the old M1903 rifle. This was because a rifle grenade solution for the Garand, what would become the M7, was not ready for issue yet. In July 1943, 3 would be issued to the squad, 1 to the assistant squad leader and 2 to riflemen who became dedicated rifle grenadiers. Additionally, 1 of the riflemen became an ammo bearer for the BAR. In February 1944, a few months before D-Day, the squad leader and assistant squad leader were promoted from sergeant and corporal to staff sergeant and sergeant, respectively. This was meant to be a means of increasing morale and perhaps to increase the experience level of low-level leadership. Although it would not be official doctrine until the mid-1950s, units in combat would often acquire a second BAR whenever possible. The last change before the end of the war was in June 1945 when the BAR man was promoted to corporal. This was most likely due to the importance of the BAR, as well as the mindset of the US Army that the BAR was a specialized weapon. Very few men in the squad, perhaps only the BAR man in many cases, was trained on the usage of the BAR. This is something that would persist through into Korea. Following World War II, there was a comprehensive Army review of small unit tactics and organization in what would be called the 1946 Infantry Conference. Among its findings were that the 12-man squad organization used during the war was too large to control effectively. Either because of the lack of experienced NCOs or because of the inherent weaknesses within the organization, the squad was not capable of effective squad-level fire and maneuver in the cases that the conference considered. While the US Marine Corps' solution was to introduce fire teams in the squad and double the number of NCOs, the US Army solution was to decrease the overall squad size. Thus, in 1948, the squad was changed to the following: 1 squad leader, a staff sergeant armed with an M1 rifle, 1 assistant squad leader, a sergeant armed with an M1 rifle, 1 BAR man, a corporal armed with an M1918A2 BAR and M1911A1 pistol, 1 assistant BAR man, a private armed with an M1 rifle, and 5 PFC riflemen. 1 of the riflemen was armed with an M1C or M1D sniper rifle, while the rest were armed with standard M1 rifles with M7 grenade launcher attachments. Although the basic organization of the rifle squad stayed the same when Korea began, the Army's rank system changed significantly in 1950. Squad leaders went from staff sergeant to sergeant first class. This was because the staff sergeant rank was discontinued for that time period. Assistant squad leaders stayed at sergeant, but the rank insignia changed to 3 stripes and 1 rocker, what we now recognize as staff sergeant. There was no longer a simple 3-stripe rank insignia which we associate with the rank of sergeant. Additionally, 3 of the riflemen billets were promoted from PFC to corporal. In 1952, the number of M7 grenade launchers was reduced from 4 to 3. Further, the BAR man's pistol was removed from the organization. In a study of the rifle squad during Korea, the Office of the Chief of the Army Field Forces essentially reversed the Army's opinion brought about by the 1946 Infantry Conference. They determined that a squad leader could lead 10 men, a squad leader could control 2 BARs, and squad level fire maneuver was possible through the use of 2 fire teams per squad. Thus, in 1956, the organization was updated once more. The squad was increased from 9 to 11 men and split into 2 fire teams of 5 men each under 1 squad leader. The organization was as follows: 1 squad leader, a sergeant first class armed with an M1, 2 fire team leaders, sergeants each armed with M1 rifles, 2 automatic riflemen, corporals armed with M1918A2 BARs, 3 senior riflemen, corporals armed with M1 rifles, one of which was a sniper M1D variant, and 2 of which had M7 grenade launchers, and then 3 riflemen, each of which was a PFC and was armed with an M1 rifle. By 1960, new weapons were introduced that replaced the World War II era equipment the US Army used throughout the 1950s. Further, a new rank system was introduced that more closely resembled the ranks the US Army currently uses. As of February 1960, the rifle squad consisted of the following: 1 squad leader, a staff sergeant armed with an M14 rifle, 2 fire team leaders, sergeants armed with M14 rifles, 2 automatic riflemen, specialist 4s armed with M14s modified for the role with the bipod, 2 senior riflemen, specialist 4s armed with M14s, and 4 riflemen, private first classes armed with M14s. In 1963, this squad was reduced from 11 to 10 men with 2 asymmetric fire teams. By the book, the Alpha Fire Team would have had 4 men, while the Bravo Fire Team had 5. Additionally, the M79 grenade launcher and M72 Law were introduced, which finally replaced the rifle grenade as the squad-level anti-personnel and anti-tank explosive weapons, respectively. Laws could also be distributed to the squads for anti-tank or anti-structure duties as needed. This was the organization that would have been used by the standard infantry for the first years of the Vietnam War, but it should be noted that the standard rifle squad was almost never adhered to due to its shortcomings and units being perpetually under strength. Because of the limitations of the M14E2 and later M16A1 as a squad automatic weapon, the M60 general purpose machine gun and its machine gun crew were often integrated directly into rifle squads from the platoon level weapon squads. This both beefed up the rifle squad's automatic firepower, while making the platoon's M60s easier to control while traversing close country. From 1966 to 1968, the M16A1 rifle began to be issued to infantry in Vietnam, replacing the M14 as the standard service rifle in 1967. At this point, the automatic rifleman essentially had the same weapon as everyone else. The M16 was more effective in full auto than the M14, but it was still not a true squad automatic weapon. In practice, the automatic rifleman essentially just became another rifleman. By 1970, a new weapon was introduced, the M203 underbarrel grenade launcher. This weapon replaced the M79 grenade launcher, allowing the squad grenadier to be armed with an M16A1 rifle as well as his grenade launcher. Up until this point, grenadiers typically only carried pistols as personal defense weapons. Following the end of the Vietnam War in 1975, squads were increased from 10 to 11 men, so 5-man fire teams were now equal. Additionally, one M47 Dragon anti-tank guided missile would have been held as a platoon HQ for the rifle squad's use if necessary, although 90mm recoilless rifles would have been used until they became available. In 1984, the basics of the current U.S. Army Rifle Squad organization were finalized. The squads were 9 men, with 2 equal fire teams of 4 men each, all under one squad leader. The new rifle squad consisted of the following: 1 squad leader, a staff sergeant armed with an M16A1, 2 fire team leaders, sergeants armed with M16A1s, 2 automatic riflemen, specialist 4s with M249 saws, although these would not be prevalent until the early 1990s, 2 grenadiers, specialist 4s armed with M16A1s and M203s, and 2 riflemen, private first classes armed with M16A1 rifles. From then to the present, changes to the U.S. Army Rifle Squad came in the form of new equipment rather than new organizations. The M16A1 would be replaced by the M16A2 in 1986. These would start being issued in the late 1980s. Most standard infantry units wouldn't start getting the M249 saw until 1991 and later, after several product improvement program modifications were made. The M16A2 would finally be replaced by the M4 carbine in the early to mid-2000s, following the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Meanwhile, the M203A2 was introduced for mounting to the rail interfaces of the M4 carbine and new M16A4 rifle. In 2012, the M4A1 carbine with a heavier barrel and full auto fire as opposed to 3-round burst was slated to replace the M4 carbine. As of the making of this video, conversions of the M4 to the M4A1 have mostly been completed. Additionally, the M320 grenade launcher produced by Heckler & Koch, a version of their AG-36, phased out the M203A2 by 2015. So that leaves us with today's rifle squad. 1 squad leader, a staff sergeant armed with an M4A1 carbine, 2 fire team leaders, sergeants armed with M4A1s, 2 automatic riflemen, specialist 4s armed with M249 saws, grenadiers, specialist 4s armed with M4A1 carbines and M320 grenade launchers, and 2 riflemen, private first classes armed with M4A1 carbines. Under current doctrine, these riflemen are also typically armed with disposable shoulder-fire munitions in combat, such as the AT-4. Of course, the supply of men, especially NCOs, is often limiting, so sergeants as squad leaders and specialist 4s as fire team leaders are common. It is also common to see the newest privates as automatic riflemen, as the M249 is the heaviest and least reliable weapon in the rifle squad today. This is ultimately variable based on the preferences of the squad leader and fire team leaders. So this has been the 100-year evolution of the U.S. Army Rifle Squad. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them down in the comments. If we have an answer, we will get to them. If you're interested in supporting our content, you can do so by checking out our Patreon. Link for that is in the description. And we've opened up our Discord to the public, so if you want in on that, that is also linked down in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.